We're only here for a flicker. We're only here for a flicker. And then it's over. Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Steve Holbrook and I'm fired up to be here today. You guys are in for another treat. Today we're talking about how to write a speech. You know, I've given now thousands of talks all over North America and parts of the world. And I'll tell you what, one of the most commonly asked questions is, how do you write your talks? How do I get started? What do I say? When do I say it? So today we're gonna cover all that. But before we get into it, please take a minute, subscribe, like it, share this after, and please give it some love. All right, here we go. Number one, start with the end in mind. When I'm about to write a talk, I close my eyes and I imagine the second that I end that talk and I start to walk off stage, how do I want people in that room, the classroom, or the arena to feel when I'm done? And I try and imagine the feeling and I write it down. How do I want them feeling when I walk off that stage? When they stand up and they head to the aisle, what's the last thing I want them thinking about? See, what I do when I write my talks is I write all my talks out and I save all my talks. And I study the closes. And depending on when I'm doing a talk or for who I'm doing a talk for, I'll take some of the closes from this talk and I'll put it into this talk. But you always want to start with the end of your speech in mind. What's the point? If you were about to say, in closing, what do you want to say? I always start with that. And then I build the body. And then, of course, I build the intro, which is the easy part. Always start with the end. The pros, they build their speeches from the bottom up. That was my first tip. Number two, make sure that your speech can relate to everybody. You know, I've been to a lot of talks and I've heard a lot of speeches from people with 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people in a room. And this person is only talking to one person. They're only resonating with all the alpha males in the room. Yet I see a lot of mothers and a lot of couples that are just kind of shaking their head going, who is this person on stage? So how do you relate to people? Well, I'm going to tell you, through storytelling. Through storytelling. By telling your story in a way that draws people in. You need to be strategically vulnerable. You need to open up and you need them thinking, oh, you know what? I'm not so much different than him. You know, maybe I didn't struggle with health challenges like he did, but you know what? I grew up poor, and struggle is struggle. I want them to feel the struggle that I had, and I want them to find their struggle in my story of struggle. And I want them to attach themselves to that, and it really opens them up, and it makes them, once you can relate to them, they're wide open. Number three, my third point. You want the best talk possible. Now, this depends on how long the talk is, but if you want to write a great speech, make sure you cover all 6 basic human needs. Now, if it's a 2-minute talk, you don't have time for that. But if it's a 15, 20, 30-minute talk, my suggestion is hit all 6 basic human needs. What does that mean? That means that everybody sitting in the crowd has a different dominant need. I'm gonna tell you what the 6 needs are. The first need is the need for certainty. There's some people sitting in the crowd that they're listening for things that make them feel certain, like structure, and you know, large companies and you know, something that's been around for a while and very stable and very credible. That's the certainty people. But then there's the uncertainty people who like variety and who like every day they want to be, you know, changing it up, and they have a hard time standing still, and these might be a bit of the entrepreneur minds. So you got to be speaking of those. The third person in the crowd that you're speaking to is somebody that's significant driven, right? They love to compete. They love to have their name said. They love to have their name on the awards. In fact, if you know who some of those people are, you want to write their names down and you want to name them in your talk. You want to say things like, and I got this girl on my team named Amber, and she's such a champion, and she fights so hard, and she works super hard for her kids. Now, I know that means a lot to Amber because Amber is that type of person. So you need to know your crowd. The fourth basic human need is the need for love and connection. There's people in the crowd that want to feel connected. They want to feel loved. They just want you to come and give them a warm hug virtually from stage. The fifth human need is a need for growth. There's some people that are listening to you talk, and their dominant need is they want to grow and they want to develop and they want to move forward. And the last human need is the need for contribution. This is a dominant one. There's people sitting in the crowd or listening to your talk that want to contribute, that want to give back. So the best talks touch on all of those in the talk. That was a lot to handle, but very, very important. Number 5, get them thinking about the day that they were born and the day they're going to pass away, because it evokes emotion. If you can say things like, man, when you, at the end of my life, I'm going to meet the man that I could have become. You're thinking about your death, and they're starting to think about their death. And then you bring it back to when you were a little boy or a little girl, and you didn't know the world, and right, you were just a sponge. You get people thinking. When they're thinking about their childhood, it makes them emotional. When they're thinking about the end of their life, it makes them emotional. So you want to make sure that you're stirring emotions through your talk, because it's getting them to think. So I might say things like, we're only here for a flicker. We're only here for a flicker. And then it's over, right? It gets people thinking about the end of their life. Number 5, use adjustments in tone and body position to make a point. You can even tell when I talk now. Sometimes I pause. Sometimes my voice goes up, and sometimes my voice goes down. But when you want to make a point, you need to know when to pause, when to soften the voice, or when to get things fired up. By using your voice and using your body language when you're on stage, you can actually draw people to you. You can control what's happening in the room. You can control the energy. There's talks where I know that I'm going to roll up my sleeves or take my jacket off and roll up my sleeves when things get intense, right? When I'm about to ramp up and go off for 4 or 5 minutes on something super intense, I'm starting to build up to something. It's when I take my jacket off, roll up the sleeves, take a couple buttons down. It's like I'm going to battle on stage, right? So it's all part of it. It's all part of the speech. Remember, you're writing a speech, you're writing a talk, you're on stage, people are listening to you, people are watching you. It's got to be valuable. There has to be something to draw them in and keep them drawn in. And my last point is this: leave them with a final thought. Leave them with a final thought. One takeaway. See, when I'm writing my talk, I always make sure that when I'm about to close my talk, I say in closing. And when I say in closing, I usually have about 3-4 minutes left, depending on the talk, but 3-4 minutes left. And I always make sure I'm at the close with at least 4 or 5 minutes extra, just in case the first part of my talk goes a little long. I want to get to my close because it's the most important part. But as I'm getting through my close, at the very end, I'll often say something like this: I want to leave you with a final thought. And when I say that, everybody's instantly thinking, okay, well, this is it. This is the most important thing. And I'll even tell them to write it down sometimes. Listen, I want to leave you with a final thought, and I want you to write it down. How good could you get if you went all in? How good could you get if you went all in? See, that's a question that I would ask during a speech, right? I had you guys drawn right in with me. So I'll say something like, listen, I want to leave you with a final thought, and I want you to write it down. How good could you get if you went all in on this thing? You guys catch that? Super, super powerful. All right, guys, I hope you guys got some value. Those are my best tips for writing a speech. I just literally gave you everything that I got. So if you enjoyed this episode, please give it some love, make a comment, share it with somebody you care about, and of course, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.